Shellye Archambeau, you are Silicon Valley's first African American CEO. You are on the board of directors of four, as far as I can count, four Fortune 500 companies, and the advisor to the president of Arizona University. You serve on the board of two nonprofit organizations, and you just wrote this amazing book, Unapologetically Ambitious. How no take risk, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. Shellye, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks so much, Ella. I've been looking forward to it.
So, Shellye, the first question is okay. I'll tell you a 1 minute story. I have a friend, and this friend, her biggest ambition is to have an ambition. And there are millions of people like that. So there is the Shellyes and Alains of the world who have an ambition every day. And there are the people who are happy just turning on the Netflix, drinking their beer or smoking their pot now that it's legal. And that's it. And then they say, wow, it would be nice to have an ambition. So before we get to how to be unapologetically ambitious, how do we even get an ambition?
Mm. So that's a good question, and I don't know that I'm the expert to tell you how to get one. But let me tell you what I found. What I found in talking to people who think, I don't have an ambition, et cetera. Um, I help define what ambition means.
Mhm.
Because to me, someone is ambitious when there is something that they want to achieve, create, impact, right, or change in the future. Because if you want to do one of those things, it means that, okay, then you have an objective. And if you have a future objective and you just start working towards that future objective, then you are ambitious. So I found very few people that when you frame it that way, there's absolutely nothing that they want to create, to achieve, or to impact, or to change. So I think it's all about helping people define what ambition is. Being ambitious doesn't mean you have to want to be a CEO, right? Doesn't mean you have to want to, go to the moon, right? Or whatever it happens to be. It's just you can be ambitious about whatever it is you want to do. One of the most ambitious people I've ever known is my mother. And she never worked outside of the house after having children. So, ambition is all individual.
Right. Wow, what was that song? Oh, uh, okay. So I'm hearing some noise, but I think I can clean it up later on. Okay, so we live in a society where, I think we are being conformed with what we have. And yes, we could have a little ambition to just make it to work, to have a job that pays the bills. Maybe a union job would be nice, or maybe a job that pays $15 an hour. I mean, there are people whose ambition is to get that one of those jobs that pay $15 an hour. And I feel like we should find a way to feed that hunger. I mean, to hunger of not being enough, not being enough to just pay my bills. And yeah, I feel that by having people who inspire you, inspire us, like you, for example, achieving so much, that would be a starting point to uh, in, uh, increase the level of our society.
Mm. Part of the reason I wrote the book was actually trying to reach people at scale to say,
Mm,
hey, if,
yeah,
if I can do this, with
right.
coming from my background, my father didn't have a college degree. We were definitely, middle class, but I am, here I am, a minority in this country, and there weren't a lot of people who've done the things that I've done right in front of me. So if I could do this, then you can do whatever it is that you want to do. So
Right.
that was absolutely a big reason why I spent the time and effort to write the book and try to, share more broadly.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about your background? From your book, I see that you were the only girl of color in your high school. And unfortunately, you got beat up by two white kids one time while going or coming back from school. And this is very unfortunate. And the thing that is even more unfortunate is that still happening today. So can you tell us, can you tell us what it felt like to be the only white kid in your high school, and later on in your life, the only the only black kid in your high school, and later on in your life as a CEO, the only black woman in the room?
Yes, what it does is it just lets you know that the odds aren't in your favor,
Mm,
right? And so I learned very young that the odds were not in my favor. And therefore, if I just did what everybody else did, I probably wasn't going to get much out of life.
right.
So I had to figure out how to improve the odds.
Mm,
And that's why I became very intentional about what it is that I do and
right.
how I do it, because I wanted more. And therefore, okay, if this is, that's how I learned how to basically set a goal. And then I'd ask myself, Alen, okay, if this is my goal, what has to be true for me to achieve that goal? And then how do I make it true? That became the plan.
Right.
So that's why I became such a planner.
Mm. Okay, so you had this moment in which life slapped you in the face, and you got up and said, "Okay, life is not fair," as told by your mother, and you got up and you tried again, and so you had that mental strength since you were a little girl. But there are some people where life slapped them in the face and they say, "I'm not good enough." And they stay like that for the rest of their life, unfortunately. I wonder, how do we build some of that strength that, yeah, we can, life is not fair. It's going to slap us around a little bit, no matter whether you are white or black or Latino, but
Absolutely.
you have to just be strong and continue struggling.
Well, I tell you, couple things. So one is it's really important to surround yourself with
Mm,
cheerleaders. And I mean
cheerleaders.
cheerleaders, Alana. I mean,
Chapter
people are
number
going to go
3.
like, yeah, there you go. We're going to be there to tell you, hey, go, Alana, you can do it. Shellye, you've got this, whatever. You need people around you who are building you up, because there's plenty around you to tear you down. So the reason I got through all this was not because of some inner strength that I was like born with that said, okay, I can put up with all of this. No, I got through it because my parents were my first cheerleaders,
Wow.
right? And then I had a couple of teachers that took interest in me and became cheerleaders. And then as I got into high school and college, I had friends who became cheerleaders. Ultimately, my spouse became a cheerleader, right? I mean, I tried to put people around me who
Mm,
would build me up, because frankly, I had a terrible case of imposter syndrome, and a terrible case of just not feeling confident, all of that. And so I needed all that help
mm,
so I could get out there and do it. So
right.
take help. The biggest thing is take help. Things get hard, things get challenging, then get help. Asking for help is a strength. It's not a weakness.
Right. Okay. And unfortunately, there are some of us that our environment is not the most positive environment. So I guess we have to go and look outside of our environment. Let's say I live in a neighborhood where everyone's smoking pot and drinking, and I don't know, there's all kind of other nefarious activity going on. Then I had to go and look for another environment where I could find cheerleaders or more positive role models.
Hmm. Yes, I think it's important to surround yourself with people who build you up, not tear you down. Life
Right.
is hard enough.
So now, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? I mean, you went to high school, you struggled throughout the way, but you graduated, you found a job at IBM. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey until you became a CEO?
Sure. So, here I am coming out of college, and I decided to pick the tech industry to build my career. I wanted to be a CEO. I decided that early. I had a conversation with a guidance counselor in high school. In the US anyway, it's these obligatory conversation that you have. Are you going to college? If so, you got to apply. What do you want to do after college? That kind of thing. And it was then that my guidance counselor said to me, well, Shellye, if you like running clubs and organizations in high school, and you'll probably like business, because business is all about pulling people together to get things done. And I said, great. Well, I love running clubs, so I'll go run a business. And when I looked around, the people that ran businesses were called CEOs. So I said, done. I'm going to go be a CEO. Did I know what that really meant? No, I had no clue. But I picked it as a goal, and that's what I went after. So coming out of college, I joined IBM because I picked the tech industry because it was a growing industry. And IBM back in the early 80s was like a leader in tech. So I said, great, I'll go join IBM and become CEO of IBM.
And that's where your father worked as well.
Yes, he did. He worked at IBM also. Yeah, he started his career fixing typewriters.
Right.
Um, so anyway, so now I'm at IBM and I'm like, oh my God, there's not like 150,000 people here. They probably all want to be CEO. So again, odds are in my favor, right? Let's be intentional. So I figured out a strategy and a path and jobs that made sense. And after 14 years, I actually did a great job of, frankly, rising through the ranks. I got to the point where I was managing $1 billion industries over in Asia Pacific. My boss was reported to the CEO, Lou Gerstner. So I was only 2 steps away, and there wasn't anyone above me that looked like me. So I'd done well, but it wasn't clear that I was really going to get a chance to compete for the CEO role. And that's what was most important to me because that was my goal. So I ended up leaving IBM to become president of Blockbuster.com. This is back in the 90s when Blockbuster was a behemoth and they were trying to stand up their web, based business. So we got that launched, but it became clear that they didn't have the long-term vision. So I worked my way to Silicon Valley, where I took 2, C-level jobs. I was the chief marketing officer and EVP of sales at a company called NorthPoint, and then LoudCloud, which became Opsware, Mark Andreessen and Ben Horowitz's company. And then from there, got hired to be CEO of MetricStream by the time I was 40.
Amazing, amazing. And okay, so can you tell us more or less what are the duties of the CEO? I mean, this is a Silicon Valley a company. You study business and you work for 15 years for IBM, but now you are driving the ship. So how does it feel like?
Oh my gosh, enormous pressure. Oh my gosh, enormous pressure because it's not just, managing the business, figuring out the strategy. Oh, by the way, I took over a very broken company. So I have a lot of heavy lifting. We needed a new strategy. We needed a new team. We needed new funding. We needed a new value proposition, and we needed new everything. So heavy lifting. And suddenly you realize that everything is on your shoulders. Not just, will the company succeed, but there are people working for this company and they're counting on these jobs for their families, right? And for the whole bit. So, oh my God, the weight is huge. And you don't have peers really, because everybody either works for you or you work for them, meaning you work for the board. So that was different. But frankly, it was a lot of hard work up front because we had so many problems that had to be addressed. So then it became one of focus. Okay, focus and priority. So first, let's stem the bleeding. Let's cut costs so we have some time and some runway. Then figure out a new strategy and a new value proposition for the marketplace. Once we had a new strategy and value proposition, then we can figure out, all right, how do we execute against it, right? How do you get the right team? How do you put the right structure, right, et cetera? So it was that way that we went forward. And, the good news is over the course of the, 14 years that I was CEO or so, we moved from a very broken fledgling company up into a market leader with customers all over the globe and over 1,200 employees. And so, yeah, did well.
Well, you prove yourself that you can hold this job, but I wonder if the fact that you were African American was one of the things holding. Did you ever feel that was holding you back, or was it always just the challenge of business and nothing else?
It's interesting. I never really thought about whether that was holding me back. All right. When you say holding you back, let me change from holding you back to making it harder. Right. Because it's hard to say holding you back because I achieved my goals, right? But did it make it harder? Sure. There were times when it absolutely is harder. I mean, it's harder raising money as a woman, as a Black woman, right? Is it harder? Yeah, it's harder. You can read all kinds of studies telling you that it's harder. So, but honestly, everybody has hard things that they deal with. Everybody does in some way, shape, or form. One of the analogies I like to use, Alen, is we've all got like the backpack. It's invisible, but in this backpack is everything that has ever happened to us, all of our experiences, any kind of difficulties and challenges that we bring with us. I mean, all of that is in our backpack. And for some of us, that backpack is pretty heavy.
Wow.
All right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, did I have a heavy backpack? Absolutely did. But that doesn't mean that I can't continue to move forward. And it doesn't mean that I can't get things done. What it means is I probably need more help, right? And so you have to make sure. That's why I said asking for help is so important. Because if everybody starts the race at the starting point, but I'm carrying a backpack that weighs 3 times more than yours does, but we're all running full speed, guess who's going to get to the end before I do, right? So I mean, it's just what it is. But we all have things in our backpack. You know, things in a backpack may come from, you know, how we grew up, whether or not we emigrated or families did, whether or not we grew up in a tough environment, whether or not we have disabilities or challenges or family. I mean, there's all kinds of things in people's backpacks. We all have them.
Right.
So the key is I don't spend a lot of time worrying about the backpack, right? Everybody's got them. I try
Right.
to figure out, how do I make mine lighter? How do
Right.
I get help? How do I bring focus? How do I stay intentional so that the backpack doesn't keep me from being successful?
Uh, I have heard of the term glass cliff. Have you heard of that? I
Oh
guess
yeah,
you have.
of course.
How much truth is that? That there are positions in which, when a company is having a hard time, they just put a woman in there on the top in order to have, according to what I heard, is to have someone to blame.
Yeah, well, let me explain it, because it really isn't this conscious. It's not like people sit around the boardroom and say, okay, we think this company's going to fail, so let's stick a woman in the job so she can take the brunt.
That's how I heard it.
No, no, it's not how it happens. But let me tell you what I think does happen. All right. What does happen is, when companies are going through challenging times, really challenging times, they begin to look at, okay, what can they do differently?
Mm.
Right. And what that does is it opens up your aperture to actually think about things that are different. Right. So when you start thinking about things that are different, you then start to consider people that you might not have considered before for
Mm.
roles, because your eyes are now broader. We've got to, okay, what's we're currently doing isn't working, right? So we're willing to now try something different. And it's in that try something different that suddenly I think more women, maybe people of color, actually get considered for jobs. It's not conscious. It's this
Mm.
unconscious thing. So whatever, and frankly, it's like human behavior. When you go through risk and challenges, people are typically willing and more open to try different things. During this period of COVID, people have tried new types of foods, they tried new types of services. We're willing to try things that are new when we go through challenge. And the same is true for companies. And so because of that, it tends to be when women, since there's so few of us, and people of color get those opportunities. So it absolutely feels like a glass cliff. It's like, okay, now that things went to hell in a handbasket, now you're willing to give me a chance, right? But it's not conscious. I really believe it's an unconscious decision.
Perfect. Thank you for clarifying that. Um, what do you do as a board member? I mean, from my perspective, that I don't know anything about, you decide who gets hired, who gets fired, but I really don't know what goes on in that room. Can you tell us what happens as a board member?
Sure. So board members are responsible for representing the shareholders. So our job is to make sure that the strategy the company has is the right strategy, that the leadership, CEO primarily, is the right CEO to execute the strategy, that the company is actually operating within all of the rules, regulations, parameters, right, that are required, that the company is actually a good corporate citizen and is treating its employees fairly, right? So our job is one of governance, right, to ensure that those are the kinds of things that are happening. But the only person that we actually hire and fire is the CEO. The CEO makes all those other decisions. So no, it's not like we're sitting there saying who should be vice president, who should be SVP, et cetera. Might there be input requested? Absolutely, right? So you might say, hey, we're looking at this, here's what we're thinking, blah, blah, any feedback, right? I mean, so yes, that's there. But at the end of the day, decisions are made by the CEO. The
So
only hire decision is
So
that.
you meet like once a week or once a month to discuss these issues, and then you just keep tabs on what's going on in the corporation?
No, each company is different, but most companies, depending on size and complexity, have anywhere from 4 to, I don't know, probably 7 board meetings a year. And at those board meetings, there are structures that you can cover the business that you need to take care of, everything around the financials, the operational, the human resources, as well as anything that's going on for governance specifically. All that stuff happens within committees. And then the meetings themselves are dealing with strategy, and obviously challenges or issues that might be out there, priorities, investments, right? Capital allocation, those kinds of things.
The women's taking the role of CEOs in corporate America, there's a small minority. I think it's less than 10%. I really don't know for sure. But is it because of lack of opportunity or because of the imposter syndrome that we spoke about previously?
Oh, it's lack of opportunity.
Mm.
Um, imposters, by the way, studies have shown imposter syndrome affects almost everybody at one point or the other. It also shows that it affects women more than men, and women of color actually the most. But it's something that most people experience at some point. So, but that's not why people aren't able in terms of to achieve. I believe it's lack of opportunity, much more so than because people aren't willing to take the risk.
I was listening to a podcast that it was Jimmy Wells, the founder of Wikipedia, where he was saying that 90% of the contributors are male in his Wikipedia page. And I wonder the same question: why are not more women taking up this? I mean, it's unpaid, but I think it's an opportunity, and I just couldn't figure out an answer.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've not analyzed Wikipedia or how
Right.
people do that or who does it all. Sorry, no answer there, Ellen.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Shelly, I cannot recommend this book enough. It really is. It just opened my mind to seeing the world from your perspective, and how you overcome barriers in your life. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the name of the book and where can people follow you and buy it and this and that.
Absolutely. So, unapologetically ambitious. Take risks, break barriers, and create success on your own terms. You can buy it wherever you buy books, bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. You can also go to Shellye, www.shellye, Shellye.com. I have links there. And you can follow me on social media. I actually put I try to inspire and impact. So I put a lot out there. And Shellye Archambeau, I'm the only one out there spelled that way for LinkedIn. And then for all the others, I'm at Shell, Shel, Archambeau, Archambeau. So
Shelly,
hope to see you online.
thank you so much, Shelly.
Thank you.